who you won't see, but you might just see the hand every now and then. I have Sweetie helping me here today. You can maybe just bring your hand into the camera. So there we go, there's the hand there. Thank you, Sweetie. So every now and then if there's a human being that is present, you know that it's him. And then the Spirit of Cacao, who's also with us today. So she's not in an embodied form, but she's definitely here in the ceremonial grade cacao, and all of us that are here that work already with cacao. Please invite her in. Maybe you want to light a candle already, or just do some invocation in your own time. I'll be speaking a little bit more to this aspect of working with cacao when we have our second part of our workshop, which is going to be a guided meditation with cacao. But first, let's get into the practicalities in the kitchen. So I am going to be offering 2 versions of making cacao today, and I will be doing both. You can join for both as well, or you can just choose to do one with me. The first one we're going to be doing is the slow brew method, which is what we would use on the stove in a double boiler system, or just in a pot where things won't burn, where we can really take our time. And this is what we would use for rituals and for ceremonies. I'm also going to be showing you a quicker method with the blender. And that is more for a superfood hot chocolate. And I like to work with both. I'm just very clear on my intention. Is this drink now for me a ritual drink, or am I working with it for ceremony, or am I just making a hot chocolate for myself? And there's no right or wrong way. There's just different reasons why we would choose one or the other. So let's start with the slow brew method. For this, you are going to need a pot, and you're going to have to put some water in the pot that needs to start heating up. So I have just boiled my kettle, and I'm going to put some of the water in. But now, if I haven't boiled the kettle, I could now start heating up the pot just by putting on the stove plate and allow that to come to the boil. It's absolutely fine having the water in the pot boiling if I'm putting a cup in the pot. So it's a double boiler system. If you make cacao for more than one person, let's say for 3 or 4 people, you might want to have a pot in a pot, in which case you're just making a larger quantity. All right, so to summarize that, you're wanting a pot with water inside that's going to be heated. So you can start heating that already, because that takes some time. Or you can just flip the kettle on and put the boiling water in the cup to save some time. And then you need your cup that you are going to be mixing the cacao in. And this just allows us to control the melting of the cacao. We never want to add boiling water into the cacao. There's a few reasons for that, but I'll mention it later. Other equipment you're going to need, something to stir with. I quite like a small hand whisk. If you have one of those milk frothers, an electric milk frother, that's also okay, but I would always go towards more of a manual method, just to take my time, to really be present with this slow brew method. Remember, the intention with this is to sit and connect to the cacao, connect to ourselves, and to take our time. So this is for rituals and for ceremonies. And then, of course, the other equipment is something to chop the cacao with. So I only have one chopping board and one knife that I use for cacao. Nothing else gets on that chopping board and is used with that knife. If you are preparing a larger dose and it's for more people, so a larger quantity, and it's not the cup and the pot, but it's a pot and a pot, you may have a molonio with you, which is the traditional hand whisk. So that also incorporates quite a lot of air, and it's a lovely method to use for making our cacao. All right, so that's all the equipment we need. In terms of ingredients, of course, you're going to need your ceremonial grade cacao. So what I do, because I work with a lot of cacao, and I often get asked this question about storage, is I will get my big blocks of cacao, and I have a whole glass jar here that I have chopped some just large blocks of cacao and put them in. All right, it's just a bit more manageable. Also, once I've opened up a big block of cacao, I want to limit the amount of air that the cacao is exposed to, because half of the cacao is actually the healthy fats, it's the cacao butter. So from there, I take it into a smaller container, which is more just for my daily use. It's a little bit more manageable than opening up that massive glass jar each time. I do the same thing. I just chop it into blocks, roughly that size, just so they can fit in my container. I like working with glass, but of course, plastic is fine as well if that's all you have. So in terms of how much cacao, this really does depend from person to person. And over time, with a safe and responsible way of experimenting, we should become more familiar with what for us is a healthy and a responsible daily dose. And we don't have to drink cacao every day either to get the benefits from it. But if you are going to be drinking regularly, I encourage you to start with a slow dose and then slowly build it up until you get to a point of, that's about the right dose for me. And there's many reasons of knowing how that's the right dose for you. And I can answer that a little bit later as well. It's a question we often get. Otherwise, if this is your first time working with cacao today and you're unsure, then I suggest, if you don't have a kitchen scale, I'm going to show you the block size, but I suggest starting with 15 grams. It is a very low dose. So if you're not going to be tasting too much later on, then just know, okay, maybe I can try 20 grams the next day, or 15 grams in a week's time. 25 grams in a week's time. And we slowly can build it up, but we don't have to have a lot of cacao to get the benefits from it. So anything from 15 to 25 grams for a daily dose. Your ceremonial doses will be a bit more. So I'm just going to measure out what this size looks like compared to my hand. So it's a bit smaller than my palm. And let's just put my scale on. And it says that this is 52 grams, right? So that would be the highest quantity of a ceremonial dose. Now I'm wanting to make a daily dose here, so I'm going to halve that block. Now I like to work more intuitively, so I hardly ever use my scale anymore, except obviously when I'm chopping cacao, measuring it and serving it to others. But for myself, I work quite intuitively. So over time, I just know that this is about 50 grams, very high end of the ceremonial dose. So I'm just going to roughly chop this in half. And then I'm going to put half of it back in my jar. Thank you to my scale. And this is what I'm going to use now for my ritual slow method. And then the second dose I'm going to use the other 25 grams of that to make a second cup here for sweetie. All right. So the other ingredient you're going to need is water. And that's all you need really. This is going to, I'll show you the method in a moment, but we're going to mix it in the cup, slowly add the cacao, slowly add the water. Now I did boil my kettle some time ago, and this in the kettle is starting to cool down. I can feel it's still quite hot. So I'm going to temper that water before I put it on the cacao. All you need actually is the cacao and the water. But most of our palates are quite used to a little bit of sweetener when we are drinking chocolate, which is what the cacao is in its purest form. It is this, the ceremonial grade cacao. So I like to add a little bit of coconut sugar or some maca powder. These are natural sweeteners, mesquite powder as well. So it just depends from palate to palate. How much coconut sugar, how much maca, again, it depends. Maybe try half a teaspoon this time. And if you like a sweeter palate, try a teaspoon. And I always add a little bit of Himalayan salt, so just a crack. And I always add a decent chunk of, or should I say a throw of cinnamon in. All right, so this is what I'm going to use for this very clean ritual drink that I'm preparing here. Let's get going. I've already put some of the water in my pot. So I'm going to start to heat the cup up by placing the cup in the pot as well. The cup is empty inside. It's starting to heat up. The actual cup itself is starting to heat up. And I've already measured my cacao. I'm using 25 grams for my daily dose. And I'm going to start to chop the cacao very mindfully. I'm shaving it very finely here. And the idea is that we use this method of slow chopping and shaving so that we can start to connect to the cacao. So you might have a powder that you're working with today, which is very different to what I'm working with. The methodology does change. So it is important that if we're starting to work with ritual and ceremony, that we get ourselves ceremonial grade cacao, at the very least a good organic cacao mass or organic cacao blocks. All right. So this is what the 25 grams roughly looks like when it's chopped, quite fine. Okay. And I'm going to just check that water in my kettle is not too hot. All right, it's cooled down enough. The water in my pot is still hot enough, and I make it a bit hotter by just putting the heat on the stove plate up a little. Let's just put a bit more water in my pot. I've got a very big cup. So I'm making a very clean cacao drink. There's no nut butter, there's no nut milk, there's no extra spices and other ingredients. It's just the cacao, the water, and a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of Himalayan salt, and I'm going to add a little bit of sweetener as well. Okay, so in my cup, I'm going to put a little bit of the cacao. So I'm putting about 1/3 of what I've chopped in, and it roughly just coats the bottom of the cup. Okay, I have my whisk ready, and you could be using a spoon. And then with the water that is not boiling, if I had to guess, it's probably about 70, 75 degrees. I'm just going to add a little bit to make a paste. Okay. So it's just coated the cacao. That's already coating the cup. And I start to mix it in the cup. All right. For those of you who already work with cacao, you might want to bring in the invocation here. You might want to just sing some song that's on your heart. It's always very nice to be able to connect through our voice as well. All right, so why I'm doing this slowly, little bit by little bit, is it makes it a smoother drink at the end. If I had to add all the cacao and then all the water, it might be quite lumpy. Taking your time and doing it slower will also give you a creamier result. Okay, so I'm going to add some cacao and some water in a moment, but first I'm going to just add a crack of my Himalayan salt here. I find working with the salt, because I also make raw chocolate, and the salt just helps to bring out the flavor of the cacao. And if you make chocolate, it helps to bring out and enhance the flavors of the actual chocolate. All right, so the whole time now, I'm also monitoring the water in the pot. Is it too cold? In which case the cacao will start to not melt as easy. Or is it too hot? In which case it will start bubbling and you just have to turn the stove plate down. So mine's actually fine. I'll turn that down now. All right, and now I'm ready for some more cacao and some more water. So I'm going to add another 1/3. So now I've got 2/3 in my cup. All right. And if I continue to stir, it's going to be like a mousse, too thick. And this now just depends. How much water do I keep adding? I'm going to add a little bit again and mix to give it a nice thick consistency, but not so thick that I can't mix it. And I didn't even tell you how many milliliters of water, because it really is personal preference. Some people like the Americano version, where it's quite watered down. It's still the same dosage inside. And some people like the espresso version, where it's less water. It'll be a bit creamier and thicker then, but it's still the same dosage. So whether I have this whole cup filled with water or half filled with water, I'm still only having 25 grams of cacao. There we go. All right. So now that's nicely mixed in. And so I'm going to do the same thing 3rd time with the last bit of cacao. So now I've added in 1/3. It's just a nice way to remember it, but just think little bit, little bit, little bit. But I've done in 1/3, 3 addings, and a little bit of water as well. So I don't like mine too watered down, actually, which is why often if you've seen me drink cacao before, I have these small little cups, and it's still the same dosage. It's just nice and thick and creamy. But of course, personal preference. If you like a nice big cup and it just feels nice between your hands when you drink it, and you like to have that full, then it'll be a little bit more watered down than the smaller cups. Okay, so if you like the cacao quite bitter, or if you're not sure at this point, you could always taste. So I have a teaspoon here, and I can always just ask my body, does it want some sweetener today, before I decide to add some. So let's take a little bit there, and this is only for me, so I can reuse the teaspoon. Nice. But I think today I'm wanting a little bit of sweetener. So I would always add cinnamon anyways. But cinnamon does help to enhance the sweet flavor. So I'm going to add quite a bit of cinnamon in here, a bit more than I would normally add, as well as a bit of sweetener. Now there's a few options. Like I already said, some coconut sugar. You can use coconut blossom nectar. You can use some honey, some bee-friendly honey. You can use mesquite or maca powder, and there's many, many other natural sweeteners. Nothing wrong with some unprocessed cane sugar. So if you have some panel or jaggery, but today I'm going to use some coconut sugar. Right. And let's make it about a flat teaspoon for my, I've got quite a big cup here, so I'm going to have half the cup of water and then a flat teaspoon of coconut sugar, so that will make it quite sweet still for my palate. I know some people who like 3 teaspoons of that sugar in a cup, so see how you go. All right. And if you want to play around with some of the natural superfood powders and you don't know what they look like, maca has this color, kind of like a beigey yellow. And I would also add about a flat teaspoon of maca for this size cup. All right. Or mesquite, which is kind of like a gray purple color. Nice. Okay, so my ritual drink here is ready to drink, but there's always an ingredient that we have to add. And that's going to be our intention, especially when we are working with the slow method. We might as well really connect into what is it we are calling in? What is it we are letting go? What is it that we want to pray for? Who is it that we want to give some love to? And it can just be energetically thinking of them, sending out some love, some light. So there could be many reasons why we want to sit and have a ritual drink of cacao. We could just want to enjoy the cacao as well. So what I'm going to do with this cup now is I'm going to put the contents in a thermos flask because I still want to show you a few things. And then I want to invite us to sit down and to enjoy it together. So I have already my thermos flask here, and I like to always preheat it with a bit of boiling water. So it's not boiling anymore, but it was quite hot earlier. And so I just let that heat up inside. Right, if you're still stirring your cacao, take your time. If you want to add a little bit more water, you can. Taste it now as well. See if it's to your palatable liking for the sweetener. And this first one that I'm making is going to be for the ritual, the ceremony, doing the slow method. I'm not adding too many other ingredients. In a moment, I'll show you my second method for a healthy superfood hot chocolate, in which case we're going to add a bunch of things together. All right, so just going to do a water offering here to my plant. It doesn't mind hot water at all. Okay. And then without messing or trying not to mess, I'm going to just decant this temporarily into my thermos. Okay. So this is not always necessary to do. It's just for the sake of showing you 2 different methods and having a bit of time in between. But what you could do is just take the cup with the cacao still in, take it like this to where you're going to be sitting, and the water around the outside of the cup will keep the cacao warm. So that's quite a nice tip as well. All right, so that is the slow brew method, working for ritual and ceremony. Very clean. What we mean by that is as little ingredients as possible. So I have my cacao. I had a daily dose in terms of grams of cacao. I didn't have a full ceremonial dose. So I used 25 grams for me. That's about a daily dose. It might be a bit less for you. It might be a bit more for you. I then added some water. It wasn't boiling. All right. It was at about 70, 75 degrees. You could even have lower temperature if you wanted to keep it into the raw principles, and you just take it up slowly, stirring. You can take it up to the right temperature for you. That will work. Inside, I'm stirring. I had added a little bit of salt, Himalayan salts, and a really good cinnamon. I use a non-irradiated cinnamon, but whatever you have available to you. And that was it. Because today I wanted a bit of sweetener, I added some coconut sugar. But you don't have to add the sweetener either. You don't have to add the salt or the cinnamon. Essentially, you could just have the cacao and the water. Adding a little bit at a time, a little bit of water, stirring, connecting, singing perhaps. Same thing, a little bit of cacao, a little bit of water, stirring. The whole time the temperature is monitored, or you're keeping it controlled with the water that's in the pot, so i.e. your own double boiler system. And if you wanted to make a larger quantity, you would just have a pot in a pot. Same principle, the water on the outside is controlling the slow melting process of the cacao. So we never have the cacao at boiling, and we take our time working with it. All right, so maybe you are now already sipping on your cacao if you can't wait. And we will be drinking it together in a short time. So if you are wanting to make a second drink with me, or just to look, maybe even to add to what you've just done, I'm going to move it over to the blender method now. All right, so I don't need this anymore. I am going to reboil my kettle, which hopefully doesn't take too long. Or sorry, I hope it doesn't take too long. I'm not going to boil so much water. And all right, get my blender. When would I use the blender? For me, I like to have the blender more for the afternoon, my superfood drinks in the afternoon, because by that stage, I've already eaten other things during the day. My energy is not as clean as in the morning. So I would have what I've got in my thermos flask now, that slow brew method. I would have that in the morning. I like to take my morning slow. I like to have ritual in the morning. So I would take my time. I would light some candles here at the kitchen. I'm going to do that later on when I sit and drink my cacao. But I would have a whole ritual space set up here. Take my time making this slow brew ritual cacao drink. And then I go enjoy it nice and clean. And I can really connect into the essence of the medicine of cacao. And I can feel her energy a bit more. Now in the afternoon, I've already engaged with people during my day. I've been doing things. I've been eating other things. And all of this affects my energy, of course. Yes, I can still make a clean cacao. But if I just wanted an afternoon pick-me-up, instead of going for my coffee, I would, which I don't drink anymore actually, I've completely substituted coffee with cacao. I would just go with a superfood drink of cacao. In which case, using the blender is absolutely fine. What I'm doing now is not adding boiling water to the cacao. I haven't even started chopping the cacao yet. I'm just heating up my blender and cleansing it with some boiling water. Right? Even though it's very clean, it's just more a ritual that I have. Okay. I think my plant has enough water offering, so I'm just going to put this in the sink. I also find in winter time, all the equipment gets quite cold, and then if I'm trying to keep the temperature of the actual drink below boiling, and I'm mixing in the blender and I'm pouring into a cup, and nothing's heated up, preheated, then it just makes my drink quite cold eventually. So here's a little tip. I'm first going to melt in my sweetener and my other ingredients. Then I'm going to temper it by adding a cold liquid. And then I'm going to add my cacao right at the end. Okay, I'm first going to chop the cacao. So let's put the blender aside for now. I have the other 25 grams waiting here for me. So I'm essentially making 2 drinks today, one for myself, one to Sweetie. We'll see who wants which one. We're done. So same thing, chopping my cacao. Now, if you're wanting this to be a quick preparation as well, you can essentially pre-chop your cacao and store it in the glass jar or the plastic or a resealable bag. In which case you don't have to do this. You could just take a spoon and scoop out about 2 tablespoons if it's shaved quite fine like this. That's roughly 2 tablespoons. All right. Then that's ready. Now I have a bunch of things to show you here, but I'm going to start with one recipe and then afterwards give you some other ones, just not to confuse us all. If you're just taking the notes, then make this as recipe 1. Recipe 1 is same thing with my sweetener. I'm using coconut sugar. You could use honey, which I have here. You could use mesquite. You could use anything you like. I'm adding 1 teaspoon. It's very sweet. 1 teaspoon straight to the blender like that. Before I add the boiling water, I'm adding my salt. A crack of salt there. I love my cinnamon, so I'm adding in lots of cinnamon. And cacao and cinnamon, they grow together in the jungle, so I call them friends. All right, then here is a little trick. Where is it? Let's first put in the boiling water, just to melt the coconut sugar and let the salt start to melt in. I don't put too much. I'm probably putting, let's see, a cup size. I'm probably putting about half of this cup. It's probably about 120 mils that I've just put in there. All right. And I just whirl it around, melting the sugar basically. Then, this is one of my favorite recipes. I'm going to add a teaspoon of peanut butter because I know it's Sweetie's favorite, so he might have this one. All right. Sometimes it might be a tablespoon, but there goes a nice big teaspoon of peanut butter. Now this makes it nice and creamy. Those of you who are used to using your oat milks or coconut milk, oat milk, macadamia milk, almond milk, the nut milks often will make it a little creamier, but this is the condensed version. So I could add some almond butter, I could add some cashew butter, and it will all be even creamier than the actual nut milk. All right, but I am also going to add a little bit of oat milk before I add the cacao, because this is still boiling water in here. It's starting to cool down, but it's probably only 95, 90 degrees, too hot for the cacao. So shake up my oat milk. So I'm just going to add a little bit just to temper, literally just that much. I guess quite a lot, if you saw what I did. Not too much because I don't want a cold drink. Now, straight in here, I put my cacao because it's not boiling in there. Right. There we go. And I just kind of know from doing this quite a lot how much a cup looks like. About 250 to 300 mils, that's about right. If I felt I needed to make it a bit, let's say I wanted to add it to fill this cup, instead of this cup size, I could now add some boiling water because it's not taking it up to boiling. Right, it just makes it a bit warmer. I think we're ready for the blender. All right, so a little bit of noise. That was about 10 seconds, doesn't have to be more than that. I also just swirl it around a bit. It just allows some of those bubbles that create the froth on top that then won't fit in the cup to settle, right? And now I know it's going to be a bit too much for this cup that I showed you earlier. So I'm going to now pour it when I'm ready to drink. If I wanted to have 1 cup, I would pour it in this cup size, but same thing over here. For this one, I'm going to pour it into my thermos. Okay. I have another thermos ready here, which I'm just going to heat up with the last bit of hot water. So that is what I would be doing right now if I wanted to move to another spot, maybe go for a nature walk. I have my cacao, my thermos, I take my cup with, I take maybe a stick of incense and a candle, and I go sit somewhere outside in nature. We're still going to drink together. I want to add something to this now. So this would be the second recipe. You can start with the same base, your sweetener, your salt, your cinnamon. Mix that in with some boiling water. So straight in from the kettle. And then you don't have to add the peanut butter like I did. You could just add some nut milk of your choice. Oat milk is quite nice. Macadamia milk is quite nice. The macadamia milk makes it quite creamy. I still like the peanut butter in the afternoon. I feel it also just gives me a few more calories and I don't feel so hungry, and it gives me not only a superfood kick, but it really does nourish me. And I just love peanut butter. And now I'm going to add a mushroom tincture. I'm very fond of these. Don't like to normally do any brand promoting here, but I often get asked this, which ones do I use? So if you're in South Africa, Ether Apothecary, can't go wrong. They specialize in mushroom tinctures and very ethically sourced, and nice connection that they have there with the spirit of the mushrooms. All right, so I'm using reishi over here. I'll just put a few down there. Thank you. 1 stopper is enough. Okay. And that's just got that adaptogenic property. Cacao and the mushrooms together, great combination. All right, so I'm going to pour this in, and then I'll give you a few more recipe suggestions. If you don't have the tinctures, but you do work with mushroom powders, chaga mushroom is wonderful, really is great. Just be mindful how much you put in because it will change the flavor. So if you like that bitter flavor of chaga, then use that. Otherwise, the tinctures are quite nice because you could also get maybe the mix of the mushrooms or not have that flavor change so much. So before I go further with some more recipes, I'm just going to show you here that I've made 2 ritual drinks. Neither is full in the thermos, but it's just to show you that I did one with the slow brew method in the pot with the double boiler system, and I used few ingredients. I definitely only added as a liquid, I added water to the cacao, nothing else. And then when I was making my hot chocolate superfood drink, I played around with a few things. Remember that everything has an energy, and everything is a plant actually that we are using here today. And they all come with a certain personality. There's nothing wrong with having all the personalities come into the party, which is what I made in the blender. But if you're just wanting to connect to the personality of cacao, then it makes sense that you want her to have primary focus, and she's the main ingredient there. And you're just adding a little bit of salt to enhance maybe the flavor of the chocolate, or you're adding some sweetener because otherwise it doesn't taste that nice for you. You know then each ingredient why you are adding it. All right, that's very important when working with rituals and the slow brew process, and for ceremonies. We're intentional with every single ingredient, and less is more. When we're just enjoying a superfood hot chocolate drink with ceremonial cacao, then we can add the peanut butters, the nut butters, cashew nut butter also, super nice and creamy, your oat milks. You can add all sorts of other spices like cayenne pepper. If you like to make it very spicy, you could actually have a crack of black pepper as well. So the combinations are endless. A trick to make it creamier, like you saw me use, is a teaspoon of a nut butter of your choice. I do like peanut butter, and I don't think it changes the flavor too much, but you could use almond nut butter, cashew nut butter, macadamia nut butter. And then the macadamia nut milk, like I said, the milk itself actually is quite creamy. If you wanted the creamiest that you can ever have, then a coconut milk, or even better, coconut cream. This is a really good one as well. The Cara brand, I think they are pretty global now. They're from Indonesia. South Africa, we can definitely get them here, but globally, for our global friends joining, any good coconut cream or coconut milk, in which case we'll taste the coconut. So it just depends if you like that flavor or not. In terms of sweeteners, I've already shown you the coconut sugar, coconut blossom nectar, I mentioned that earlier. It just depends what you have access to. I prefer to use natural sweeteners, and I like to use the superfood sweeteners as well. So the maca powder and the mesquites are very nice. And honey, of course, if you aren't vegan, honey, try get yourself a nice bee-friendly honey, as I call it. One that's been respectfully harvested. And then, I'm not a fan of essences, but again, if you want to just have a little bit of the flavor of vanilla and you only have an essence, just have a little bit of that. So I would add this right at the end and just stir it in. But of course, you could put it in at any point in the method. I've already mentioned some of the tinctures or the other powders that I use that involve mushrooms, which have a great adaptogens. And I personally only work with Himalayan salts, but of course, whatever salt you have available to you. And I mentioned some of the other spices that we can use, which I haven't used today because it's quite a warm day here and I don't really want to increase my energy anymore. I'm pretty buzzed doing this workshop. But these are the things like your pepper, your cayenne pepper, chili flakes. You can have, you could actually take the seeds of the chili, crush it. I've got my pestle and mortar here. I haven't used it today just because it takes a bit long to do everything from the actual plant source instead of working with the powders. But take your time with this, prepare your space and just have fun and play. Let me just see anything else. All right. In a moment, I'm going to move on to the other space, but I just want to mention in terms of the look when we drink the cacao, that's all very much part of it as well. So what I like to adorn the cup of cacao with are these, which are dried rose buds. So they're the small little rose buds. Or a friend actually gifted this yesterday, dried rose petals that have been hand collected, and preferably from roses that haven't been sprayed. All right. And then you can take that once they're dried, and you can just crush it lightly and sprinkle it on top. That also looks beautiful. If you know the star aniseed, that also looks very beautiful for putting it just on top of the cacao. If it's nice and thick, it'll just sit there. So we become very meditative before we even sip the cacao, which I'll guide us through in a moment. We just have a look and we take in everything with our eyes. The nice thing with the star aniseed and these rosebuds, they are all edible. And after some time in the cup, that flavor does come out. And some people, even with the rose petals, for example, they might even distill their own rose water and add that into the cacao mix while they're stirring. So 2 very different methods there, but essentially we're getting a beautiful combination working with cacao. Depends if we're just wanting a superfood health drink, or if we're wanting a ritual, ceremonial, clean drink. We're going to take our time more to connect. I'm going to see if there are any questions. So, Julianne.
There was one question, Fran, about whether you can use maple as a sweetener.
Nettle or metal?
Maple.
Maple. Yes.
Maple syrup?
So, absolutely, especially if you live in countries where maple syrup is easy to come by and you can get the proper maple syrup. Yes, I know most of our followers from South Africa here, it's very difficult to come by maple syrup. So I just always forget to mention it. But yes, I mean, especially if you have sources of maple syrup that are right next door, definitely a good maple syrup. It'll be the same thing as a good honey. I would rather wait to source a good honey or a good maple syrup than just go buy anything that I'm not too sure where it comes from. Let's have another question there.
Yes, there's just one more question that's come through about what you could use to get an orange flavor to your cacao.
Ooh, okay. Love that question as well. 2 things come to mind. I didn't bring it into this workshop because technically you shouldn't ingest these things. Technically, it's what it says on the essential oil. So, you know, you get that all these different essential oils, you get your peppermints, which I also use sometimes. Sweet orange is lovely. Now, some people really shouldn't be ingesting them. And also it's there as, you know, just a safety precaution for pets and children and all of that. But I'm quite fond of experimenting with them. I find they're absolutely fine for my body. So I would add 1 drop. If you can just get 1 drop out there, it will make it quite intense if it's just a small cup. So the same with the peppermint essence. You can also just add 1 little drop and then you can get that. So back to the question around orange, or you could take some orange zest and you just grate it on top of the cacao for after effect. But while you are stirring it, you could also grate some in there. When we make pots of cacao for ceremony, for example, we have a lot of alonga. You can imagine how slow that would take, you know, adding the cacao in bit by bit, slowly stirring, singing, invoking. It can take up to an hour just to make a pot of cacao for a few people. And then I would say to actually add a nice chunk of that orange zest in there and let it brew in, almost like you're making a tea with all the spices. You can have the cinnamon sticks in there and all of that. And then you would just drain that out or strain that out, and then you're left with that infused orange flavor. So either you could just grate it in a little bit and on top, or you could actually get yourself sweet orange essence. What's another question?
So our last one that's come through, Fran, is just around rose water. I'm not too sure specifically, but perhaps you can just speak to that a bit more.
Okay. This question I have been asked before, and I haven't yet found a source of pure rose water that comes from roses that haven't been treated or sprayed. That is pure rose water, except for people that make it themselves. So you can take the rose petals and you can do a beautiful moon ritual with this, and over a few days you would just allow that rose water, the rose petals or the rose buds, to just be infused in the water in a jar, for example. I don't have a small one here, but kind of like this size jar, well, small compared to the bigger one I showed you, and you could have it sitting in there and let it be outside the sunlight, and then naturally as well, that sunlight would heat up the water. So it's a very natural, long process. And then the rose flavor would slowly infuse out into the water. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's going to take a few weeks to get any flavor if the water is not heating up. You could speed up that process by boiling the water and basically making like a rose jam, but you don't add sugar. But essentially, that's how you would make it sweet if you were adding it to the blender or your pot, is where you would add some sweetener. So you could actually, if your intention is to make a sweet rose water, you boil up the rose buds or the rose petals with whatever sweetener you enjoy, boil it, boil it, boil it, boil it, and eventually it distills. Not till it's thick and creamy, thick like a jam, but you'll know, you'll be able to taste it and go, ooh, that tastes like sweet rose water. And that's essentially what it is. So you can experiment at home. But please try use the roses and the rose petals that haven't been treated and sprayed. So that might be a challenge already, trying to find that. Is there another question, Julianne?
Could you use herb teas for flavor?
Oh, love this question as well. Yes, I'm very fond of using other plants to assist this process. And so if it's just for the flavor of the plant or for the actual energy that you want to bring in from those particular plants, and you know that you work with them or you have a connection to them, you can just make the tea first. So you steep your tea, whatever tea you choose, and then that will be your base water. So I was just showing you using from the kettle and heating it up slowly in the cup or straight in the blender, depending on what your intention is for the drink. But you could be using the actual water that is tea, and then you could add the cacao to that, your sweetener to that, your other things to that. For that, I would recommend just the slow brew method and not adding too many other ingredients. You might want to, again, use a little bit of a sweetener just to take the bitter edge off, because some of these teas, as well as cacao in their pure form, are very bitter. But that's how you would do it. Replace the water with your tea that is pre-made. It's lovely. So you could experiment there. For example, this pot here. I always keep some ginger and cinnamon sticks and star aniseed, and I just top it up, and then I drink that throughout the day. And I can often get 2 or 3 pots from this. And I just keep adding some things there, and it becomes such a nice blend of all these good plants. Now, this is not anything very specific for a specific intention. It's just it tastes delicious. So sometimes then I'll use this in my cacao and heat that up. So that's how I've learned over the years, is just to experiment, really just experiment and explore and have fun with it. So we have time for one more question before we take a quick break, so we can all move to our sitting place and enjoy our cacao together.
It's a question here, Fran, about whether turmeric and cacao can be considered good partners.
Yes, absolutely. Very earthy, cinnamon. Turmeric is a root. And when we understand the energy of cacao, she comes from the earth. She comes from, we often refer to her as Mama Cacao, which is very much connected into Mother Earth and Pachamama. So anything that we use that can speak to that, and turmeric is a great one. Remember, turmeric is quite strong as well, especially if you are using a powder form. So taste-wise, it might not work for you, it might work for you, but if you can actually use the actual root, then you can mindfully just chop some and maybe make a tea beforehand as well, a turmeric tea, and then use that. And very, very good as well, for the gut and anti-inflammatory qualities and all of that. So yes for turmeric. Okay, one more question, and then we'll take a little break.
We haven't got any more at this point, Fran, so our timing works out perfectly.
Perfect. All right, everybody. So if there are some more questions, please put them in the chat box and we will address them at a later stage. But for now, we are all going to move ourselves, if we haven't yet already, to our drinking space. And the setup there is going to be one where you are incredibly comfortable, where you have your cacao ready to be poured if you haven't yet poured it. I'm still going to pour mine, so I'll talk us through that process. And then get comfortable, because I'm going to guide us through a meditation with the drinking of the cacao. So we're going to meet back in 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to start to sing. That's how you'll know I'll call us back with song. So for now, you can put your camera off if you want, and you can just rearrange yourself if you need to. And we're going to do the same on our side. We're just going to put our camera and our mics off, and then we're going to just shift into our meditation space. So we'll see you shortly. We'll call you back with song. Whoa. And let's arrive back. If you're still getting yourself set up, if you would like to keep your camera off, you're welcome. Otherwise, if you would like to just feel more part of the space, you can put your camera on, completely up to you. So this part, we are going to work in a ritual way. This is going to be a meditation with our ritual drinks. And before we do anything else, if you haven't yet already, please join me in lighting a candle. This is just to call and acknowledge the light that is in ourselves, the light that is in the world, in every sentient being, in life itself. And this is how we activate the medicine of cacao. We activate the spirit, we call in the spirit, which is why working slowly and making the cacao in a very slow, mindful way, we start to bring in the heat slowly, 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 slowly. And so we can have more time to acknowledge calling her in and activating the spirit in ourselves and in her. All right. So with that candle, you can place it in front of you. And we're just going to start with a bit of an open eye meditation before we bring the cacao energy in. So you can have a look at the flame in front of you. Otherwise, if you don't have one, it's okay. You can just look at my candle and just use the flame here. Let's show you. There we go. And as we look at the flame, we can start to connect into the element of fire. You might see how the flame dances as it starts to wake up. And even if there is no breeze around you, there'll always be slight movement in that flame. So we just can acknowledge the constant movement of life, the constant change. So just taking another 2 breaths as you acknowledge the element of fire. If you have any incense around you or any other smokes you would like to burn, then you can do that now if you haven't yet already. I'm just working with a smoke here to cleanse my hands, and even though they are clean already physically, I always just like to do an energetic cleanse before holding the cup and bringing the medicine in. So no matter what you're working with, even if it's just the air around you, you could just use your one hand to take it around the other hand. If you're working with a particular smoke, you can take it between the fingers. And then you can do both hands as well. And these small little rituals just help us to slow down, take our time, connect in with the space and what we're actually doing. They allow our minds to come to this moment here and now and be present. And before we work with the drink of cacao, we're going to connect into our air element of our breath. And so at this point, you're welcome to close your eyes. You're welcome to place the hands either on the chest, in a prayer position, on the belly, on the legs, just to have some gesture with the hands, because essentially the hands are an extension of the arms, which connect us into the center of the chest, which is where our spiritual heart resides. We activate when we drink the medicine of cacao in the metaphysical and spiritual spaces. So if the eyes are closed, and if the hands are together, you can just breathe into the space between the palms. If the eyes are open, if the hands are in a different position, just breathe into the spaces between the gaze, where the gaze lands and where the hands are situated. Just seeing your out breath as a way to relax the body and the mind. We're just going to take a few moments to stay focused on the out breath. And this is also a way that we can connect and say thank you to Mother Nature, because this is what we've been working with up until this point today. We've been working with cacao and so many other ingredients, which all come from the plants, which all come from Mother Nature. And so what I mean by the out breath being a way of saying thank you, very practically, when we breathe out, there is carbon dioxide in that out breath. And that is exactly what all the plants take during the day. That's what they take up. And they utilize that for photosynthesis. They need our out breath. And so every time we breathe out, we can think of that air going back to Mother Nature, saying thank you, blessing her, giving back to her. And so through that photosynthetic process, the plants can grow, and they give off, in turn, oxygen during the day. And this is what we need for us to survive. When we breathe in, it's that oxygen that comes into our blood and goes into all our cells. Or we could take this a little deeper and say it's not only the oxygen, but it's the life force energy, the prana, from nature. So just a few more of those breaths of reciprocity, giving back, saying thank you on the out breath. And then receiving into the space inside from nature on the in breath. Today we are working with the very beautiful medicine of cacao coming from a tree called Theobroma cacao. And so we thank these trees, we thank the farmers that grow the trees, that have lovingly and sustainably harvested the pods of cacao, and all the hands that is it exchanged through until it meets us today. Just taking a final breath in thanks before opening up the eyes if they were closed. And then if you haven't yet poured your cacao, then please do so. For those who would want a fun little ritual of a cleanse, then I take the smoke that I'm working with, even if it's just incense, and I just turn the cup upside down to receive some of the smoke. And this is a lovely thing you can do with water as well. You could just heat your cup up with some water before, and then that water offering could be for your body or back to nature. You saw me do it earlier with my plant in the kitchen, just to offer the water to the plants. All right. So everything is lovely, beautifully cleansed. So I'm now going to pour my cacao ritual drink into my cup, and I'm going to sing at the same time. I invite you to either hum along with me or just to set an intention. We're then going to hold the cup together between our hands, and I'll guide us further from there. Cacaocito la medicina, cacaocito la di. Cacaocito la medicina, cacaocito la di. Cura, cura que persito, cura, cura la di. Limpia, limpia, espiritito, limpia, la di. Cacaocito la medicina. Cacaocito la di. So holding the cup between the two hands, representing the left and the right coming together. Perhaps by now the eyes are closed. Perhaps you're already feeling the temperature of the cup, but start to connect into the position of where the cup is, sitting between the polarities of left and right, of the energy lines of feminine and masculine. Holding the cup between the hands that are an extension of the heart. Trying to keep the eyes closed for the next part. Slowly bring the cup closer to the face so that you can smell the cacao, and just keep it close to the nose for a few smells. Allow the information of smell to come to you. And just observe between each smell. Try not to rush this process. Slow it down, seeing this as your meditation to receive so much through the other senses before taste. And then just pause with the eyes closed, holding your cup, feeling the temperature, smelling the medicine. And just start to open up that space of the spiritual heart, Anahata chakra. And this is the space that the cacao will start to activate. Already, just by smelling her and having prepared her, she's already starting to work there. And when we drink her, she'll assist that to expand even more into our own qualities of love, kindness, connection, acceptance, forgiveness, compassion. Come back to an intention if you have one, or just one of these qualities that I just mentioned of the heart. And before we take a sip, we'll take another final breath into the heart to activate that intention or that quality we want to bring in today. Hold the breath for a moment. And then lightly blow the exhale of that into the cup. This is infusing that intention and that final ingredient into the medicine. If you feel you would like to do one more, then please do. I'm going to. Otherwise, take your first sip and just keep it in the mouth. Just really activating the intention, whether the cacao is in the mouth already or you're still blowing onto it. Cacaocito, la medicina, cura cuerpecito, limpia espiritito. If you haven't yet, please take a sip, holding the cacao in your mouth and having a meditation on the taste. While I had to swallow just to speak, I encourage you to keep it in the mouth for a little bit. Perhaps slowly moving the tongue around in the mouth, and now starting to receive information from the sense of taste, from all the different taste buds in the mouth. When you're ready to swallow, do so mindfully and continue to trace the sensation down the throat, into the stomach. And just know that all the goodness goes into the bloodstream, is taken throughout the entire body. The cells know exactly what to take. The energy knows exactly what it needs to be unblocked, to be cleansed. And we start to connect to the spirit of the plant. We start to connect to our own spirit. We start to connect to the spirit in all things. And so we take our time with these sips, pausing between each one. And when you're feeling ready, you can do another slow sip like that, where we first smell the cacao. Remember to just take your time. When you do take it into your mouth, just pausing there, slowly moving her around before swallowing. And the real medicine here is the sacredness of the pause and of being still, of being quiet, of being with yourself, of being with whatever comes up for you. So while you have a few more sips like that, I'm just going to sing the invocation again. In English, it means, cacao, my medicine, heal my little body, and cleanse my little spirit. Cacaocito, la medicina. Cacaocito, la medicina. Agaucito la medicina. Agaucito la di di di. Agaucito la medicina. Agaucito la di di di. Cura, cura, versito. Cura, cura, la di di di. Limpia, limpia, espiritito. Limpia, limpia, la di di di. Just continuing to acknowledge how you are feeling. We notice this in many ways in the physical body, in the emotions, in the thoughts, in the mental body, in the energy, in the spirit. So whether you still have some cacao left or if you finished, just continue to stay in the space of being with yourself while we open up for a small group cluster of circles in breakout rooms, and just to have 8 minutes together in opportunity to share or just to meet others. If we were having enough time for a larger group share, we'd each go around and just say our names and perhaps speak into an intention that's come up for us today, or just what we found interesting, maybe just to say something that is on our heart. There really is no pressure to speak more than just hello, my name is, but if you would like to say something more, you'll have 2 minutes. So we're going to have breakout rooms, excuse me, and we'll have 2 minutes each to speak. So Julianne, if you could put us into breakout rooms of 4 people in each breakout room, and then we'll all come back at the end and I'll just close off for us. So enjoy your circle with cacao. Welcome back, everybody. If you still have some cacao in your cup, then you can just bring that in with you to your heart space. Otherwise, if you don't need the cup anymore, you can have the hands in prayer. Either way, we connect again the hands, the left and the right, bringing everything into union. And that word that we know in the world called yoga, you might not know that the source of the word, the root word yog, means union, it means connection. And so I just love all the connected parts of so many different traditions. And I, for one, definitely have taken on so much learning from multiple disciplines and multiple traditions. And I'm sure if you're sitting here today as well, it's not just cacao that you work with or have worked with in the past or are interested in. So I love working with Mama Cacao because she reminds me that I can be in my heart always. And I can be inclusive always. I can love always. That is a choice. I can be kind always. And that is how I can be with myself. I can be inclusive with myself. I can be loving and accepting and kind. And when I practice that for myself more and more, then I will naturally be interacting and behaving and responding to the world around me like that. The people, the animals, nature. So this really has changed my life, and it's a very big part of my life now. And I'm so happy to be able to say that I work with sacred chocolate every day. And if this is interesting to you, then you're welcome to find out more. We do offer trainings, which are starting soon. But if it's just the ritual spaces that you would like to pop into from time to time, and we have a ceremony coming up on the 17th, an online ceremony. And so you're welcome to join us for that as well. But in closing, let's just bring it back into the space again, just to come back to perhaps the reason why you came today, the reason why you are here. You don't have to take too much time to think about it, just feel in. Perhaps it was just curiosity. Maybe there was a particular bit of information you wanted. Maybe it was an experience being held, learning from somebody else. Perhaps you just needed to give yourself some time, some self-love. So whatever it is, allow the eyes to close if they're still open, holding the hands together and connecting into the heart. Allow those hands to continue to be the expression of the heart. So the next time you shake someone's hand or touch someone or hug someone, know that it's always from the heart that you can choose to live, to act, and to be. Allow a few more breaths as we connect back into gratitude for nature. She gives us the oxygen that we breathe in, that we need to survive. And in thanks, we give her the carbon dioxide that she needs, that the plants need when we breathe out. So there's always this cycle of giving and receiving. An equal energy exchange where we are part of this greater life. The medicine of cacao teaches us to remember what we already have inside. These are the qualities of our spiritual heart, the qualities of love and compassion, of kindness, of forgiveness, of acceptance. And all this deepens us into the joy of gratitude, the joy of living. And so we thank the spirit of cacao, Ish Cacao, Cacacito, Mama Cacao. May she continue to assist us along our journey in life to remember what we already are and remember what we already have. Cacacito la medicina, cura cuerpecito, limpia espiritito. And for the final few breaths sitting here together, I invite you to bring to mind another being, whether it's human or other, who you would like to share some of this love of your heart with. Perhaps it's somebody that's going through a particularly rough time at the moment, or just somebody you would like to extend some gratitude to, perhaps an animal, a place on the planet, perhaps a guardian angel. And just bring them in between your hands. Allow a mini version of that energy to sit lovingly between your palms. Allow your in-breaths to activate this medicine that you have in your heart of love and compassion. And just let your exhales blow over the hands. You can even bring the hands closer up to the face if you want. Your inhales activate the heart space, and your exhale gives out some of this heart space into that energy in your hands, giving back, spreading this love. And then alongside that energy of that other being in your hands, please bring a mini version of yourself there as well. So you're holding yourself and other between your palms. And you're going to do 3 more breaths like this, of love to yourself, of love to other, of connection. Of support. And of community. And may that go forwards with you into your life, into the seen and unseen spaces in which you take your energy. We'll take another deep breath in together and just hold it for a moment. Just seeing this as the final breath in, activating. And to close off our space together, breathing out. If you need one more breath like that, then please take it. Holding it for a moment. And then exhaling. If you feel it's helpful, just rubbing the hands together, creating a bit of heat. And what I like to do, just another little ritual. Sometimes if I've had my eyes closed for some time, I don't like to just open them into the bright light. I like to gently wake the eyes up again. So then I just keep the eyes closed, rub some heat into the hands, and then just place the hands, I cup them over the eyes, blink the eyes open into the hands, and then just glide the hands down. And that's a nice gentle transition. For those of you who like to just cleanse a final time, you'll just take the hands the other direction. So I'll take them up over the eyes, over the back of the head, back of the neck, and just flick it out. So if we could just have the hands in prayer one more time, if your cameras are on. And if you do have the gallery view in front of you, you could just take a look around at all these beautiful beings and just saying thank you as you take a look around this room. So thank you to all the faces I recognize, all the faces I don't recognize. All I see is just beautiful energy coming through. So thank you, everybody. If you would like to leave the room now and just continue in your own ritual, you are welcome. If you have to get going on with your day, then as well, you are welcome. And otherwise, I'm going to be on for another 5 minutes. So if you have a question you would like to pop into the chat box, you are welcome to do that. If it's easier for you to just unmute yourself, I see a hand raised.